Welcome to Rev'd Up for Sunday, everyone. We're the clergy of St. Mark's Episcopal Church in New Canaan, Connecticut, and this is a podcast on the gospel for the upcoming Sunday. I'm Elizabeth Garnsey.
I'm John Kennedy.
And I'm Peter Walsh.
And today we're at the last Sunday in June, and we're at a very classic example of a Markan sandwich construction gospel, and it's an exciting one. It's beautiful. It's about Jesus' preferential treatment of the poor. It's about healing. It's about crowds. It's about leaders and anonymous people. It's about all sorts of things. So let's dive in and hear the text. This is Mark 5:21 to 43. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." And so he went with him. And a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with them and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. The gospel of the Lord.
Well, truly an amazing passage. The more time you spend with it, the deeper you can go with it. And perhaps just to say something simply about it, to begin, this is, as you alluded to, a classic example of what is known as a Markan sandwich or a Markan interpolation, when we have one story that is interrupted by another story that's just nested within it, like the meat of a sandwich, only to return to the first story of the passage. That's what's going on here. We have the healing, the drama of Jairus' daughter, this leader of the synagogue, being sick and at the point of death, and Jesus going on his way to heal her, interrupted by the woman with the hemorrhage or the issue of blood. And so that's what we have here. Two incredible acts of power, as Mark is fond of calling Jesus's, what we would call Jesus's miracles. The Greek there is like acts of power. And it's where we get the word dynamite. That's the Greek there, exactly.
Yeah.
So powerful stuff here.
Oops. Yeah, it is.
I just knocked your mic over.
I know.
With Jesus' power.
Dynamite.
I think it's really worth comparing these two girls too. I think we have a situation where we have two well, I guess one is woman, and then but Jesus is calling her daughter as if she's a girl too, the hemorrhaging woman. But, two females, and they're at opposite ends of the spectrum. One's the leader of the synagogue. So, by code, social code, she should really be given the priority. And then you have this woman who's anonymous and impoverished, and she's sick. She shouldn't be in this crowd in the first place. With her, when women were bleeding, they were sequestered off until they could be made clean and do their purity rituals and stuff like that. But she's so desperate that she presses into the crowd to find Jesus. So, she has disadvantage on three fronts. She's unclean, she's sick with her disease, ostracized from the community because of that, and she's been bankrupted, by the people who should have been helping her and making her well. And the opposite end is this leader's daughter who's been privileged, and so, I think this is on purpose that Mark is sandwiching these stories together because it's illustrating the way Jesus moves through a crowd, and he's been asked by the top person to help him. So he goes on his way, but takes time to stop and listen to this poor woman. So just to set us up for that comparison.
Yeah, an incredible scene. This is dynamite. This is a dynamite story. And as much as Mark uses such an economy of words, this is a phenomenal movie scene in the making, and there's little bits and pieces and parts that fill it out a little bit. But most assuredly, what we have is a story of Jesus as divine dynamite, and in the dynamite, he blows up everything that is not divine, and he blows through the sicknesses of each of these. He blows through all of the human-made boundaries around each of these two and all these things. I mean, Jesus breaks the code. He would have been ritually unclean to be touched by the ritually unclean woman, as you were pointing out, Elizabeth, and he would be made ritually unclean by touching the hand of a dead girl too. And so it seems to me that, the story is ultimately not about each of the women, but it's the women that are the mirror that cast back on the quality of divinity that Jesus is revealing to the world. And it's that God's healing love heals all things that are, healing in this case by his touch, health, and also restoring each of them. To your point, I think the point that is embedded in what you were saying, embedded is to life and to society where they were cast away, and also to the fullness of their religious life. This healing is completely holistic in every way. And so, even when he says, shalom, go in peace, this woman this woman who's been hemorrhaging for 12 years and got worse has had no peace for 12 years. No peace.
Yes, it's exactly
amazing,
right.
Amazing story.
It is amazing. And I love how Jesus' power, which we've been seeing up until now in Mark with the previous healings and acts of power like calming the storm, is now more clearly joined together with Jesus' compassion. Like you said, Peter, this is like a movie scene, and part of why I agree with that is because of the pathos of the story. That of all the characters, really, the desperation of Jairus and the woman who is bleeding, the unbelief and the sarcasm of the disciples and the people gathered around Jairus' dead daughter, and Jesus's calmness, his compassion, his determination, his steadiness, which leads me to something else that I find really interesting. I really think your take, Elizabeth, is interesting on why Jesus delays going to Jairus as sort of a preferential option for the poor. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think that is consonant with how Jesus operates. But I did think about that dynamic nonetheless and thought it was super interesting because Jairus' daughter, first of all, is like a girl, which generally sort of tugs at our heartstrings, right? Like a child versus an adult. Has an acute condition, like she's at the point of death. Time is really of the essence. The woman with the hemorrhage, her condition is terrible, and without diminishing its awfulness at all. It's a chronic condition.
Mm-hmm.
Time is not really so much of a factor there. It could wait like another day, a few hours, whatever. But Jesus stops for her anyway. I mean, she grabs Jesus, or she touches Jesus, but Jesus stops to identify her and to interact with her and to make it all the clearer to her what he's done for her, mm-hmm. and what healing she has received from him, which is super interesting. And this reminds me of the Lazarus story, when Jesus is told, this is in John's gospel, of course, that his friend Lazarus is sick and at the point of death, and he waits until Lazarus dies.
Right.
And similarly, we get the sense that perhaps if Jesus had gone straight to Jairus' daughter, she wouldn't have been dead. So it's almost like Jesus is using a delay as sort of a teaching tool about who he is, about how he works, about what his power is, which I find super, super interesting.
It is. And I think those things point to the resurrection too, because he understands that, dying has to precede rising, mm-hmm. and he lets it go to the point of death as a kind of foreshadowing or something. Yeah. I'm also struck in this story by all the static around Jesus. And, if we go straight to the outcome, both people are healed completely. And there's just a full sweeping process of healing that's mm-hmm. gone on. But all throughout, there's all this just static and things that could distract Jesus and take him off course. You've got this crowd pressing in on him, probably rushing him towards this leader's daughter, whom they all think is the priority and should be in their time and place. And even the disciples are like, why bother? There's a whole crowd pressing on you. Just keep going, and they don't really have the ears or the heart to stop and see what happened. And the healing has already taken place. Like, Jesus could easily say, great, that was easy. That was an easy one. I didn't even have to turn around. I felt mm-hmm. the power go out. I'm sure it's been done. But he really cares so much more about these categories of clean and unclean, healed and sick. He really is about restoring the whole community. And, this number 12 is no accident. The woman's been sick for 12 years. And at the end of the passage, we get this bracket from Mark. This girl was 12 years old. So as long as the little girl has been alive, this other woman has been suffering. And in a way, if it's symbolizing the 12 tribes of Israel, it's maybe illustrating the impoverished and the privileged, and what a chasm there is between them. And, one's a nobody, the other one's a somebody. And Jesus, he cares about them both, but he's not going to not stop and listen to the nobody. He finds out who she is. He finds out what's happened to her. He listens to her whole story. He calls her daughter, restores her to the community, credits her with the faith that made her well. She pressed into the crowd when she knew she shouldn't, and when, at risk of her life maybe, and sends her away in peace. Like, that to me is the icon of how Jesus cares for the poor, and how the poor have something to teach the privileged, because they have a story and they have a place in the community, and their story's worth hearing. And, Jesus takes his time, and he has every confidence that he's still going to go on to Jairus' house. And, he's so what we heard last week about the stilling of the storm. Jesus is the calm one in the midst of all this storm, and he's just doing his thing, knowing where he's going. So I think in a way, like, the holisticness of the story is that the whole community cannot be healed until the poor person is tended to and listened and brought in and considered and validated, and given the time to be brought up. And then, you know what I'm saying? So I think then he goes on and he can raise the little girl in Jairus' house. But you can't just have one without the other, because it would be totally incomplete.
Yeah, yes to both of you on all that stuff. No doubt that's all true. The one thing that I went on my understanding is with the hemorrhaging woman that the way the Greek is that she too is on the verge of death, though it wouldn't be necessarily momentarily, but that she had come to the end. Whereas the little girl, it says when Jairus says she's at the end, the word in Greek is eschaton. She's at her eschaton.
Oh wow!
So she's at her end time. I do think that one of the things that's so characteristic of Mark's gospel is the swirl and whirl that's around Jesus, as you pointed out, the calm of the storm, and whether or not the storm is the storm of the sea or the storm of the people. And then when the great crowds are pressed upon him, he gets off the boat. Doesn't identify the town that he gets off, but he's just come from the Decapolis. He's come from the other side. He's come from the Gentile pagan other side, and steps out, and you get the sense that there's all these people here, and they're pressing in on him. And then when Jairus, who perhaps Jesus was at Jairus's synagogue in a previous time, and you can almost get that Jairus is waiting on the beach for him, and that the humanity of Jairus falling down at his feet, because this is like Saint Jude, Saint Jude in the Roman Catholic world being the patron saint of lost causes. Each of these is a lost cause. The girl is on the verge of death, and we find out dead, and that there's nothing left, and the hemorrhaging woman is about to die. So they're both lost causes, and that the stories are to point toward Jesus, in whom there is no lost cause, and that regardless of poor or rich, that, in my opinion at least, in that in Jesus there is life, and there is light, and there is love, and that there is misunderstanding that swirls around him. I mean, when he says, "Who touched me?" and the disciples are kind of chafed by it, he's not talking to the disciples. He's, as you're pointing out, he's seeking the woman. And he says he looks for her. And this is the same look that he uses when he's in the room when his parents come to take him because they think he's crazy, and he looks around. When Jesus is looking around, he is looking for something, seeking something, and that in his conversation with the woman, it's in the conversation with the woman where she tells him the whole thing, and he, the daughter, which is not based on age. It's a term of affection and love, and in her whole story, he gives very fulsome answer to her. That she is healed and she's healthy, and the Greek has it that she's healed forever. That this is done, and not just a temporary fix. And I mean, the more you plunge, the deeper you go, you see that the love of God manifest in Jesus points toward this incredible, comprehensive love that encapsulates all. It's amazing, amazing story.
Yeah, it is. It is. So we have the crowd scene, and then we have the house scene. You want to comment, either of you, on, or where were you going to go, John?
Well, I was just going to connect this to the broader theme of Mark, which is the proclamation of the kingdom, that the kingdom has come near. That's like the first thing that Jesus says in Mark, and we've made that connection in previous weeks with his healings that we've seen before, with his exorcisms, with his calming of the storm. All of this is sort of contending with everything that, again, to use language from our baptismal covenant in the Book of Common Prayer, corrupts and destroys the creatures of God. And this is just a continuation of that. And I just wanted to highlight that because this kingdom is a kingdom of love. It's a kingdom of compassion. It's a kingdom of life. And we're seeing, I think, the sort of affective, tender quality of the kingdom here with these terms of endearment, with Jesus' really connecting with people, that this is not a kingdom like any other that has ever existed or ever will exist. This is the kingdom of God, which is just of a totally different order. And that and Jesus is somebody who has power. This kingdom has a real power. I mean, we've talked about the dynamite-ness of things in my sermon on the mustard seed the other day. I talked about how, the kingdom of God is principally a power before it's like an idea or a message or something that you like download into your brain. It's like a power that's at work, and we see that at work here. But I just wanted to thread that again once again to the compassion and tenderness of Jesus here. That's what he's bringing about, and that's how he's overturning and driving out everything that again corrupts and destroys God's creation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a conquest of death. I mean, that's the resurrection is the ultimate conquest of death, and he's breaking down all the things that bring death, whether or not it's cultural or whether or not it's health, or that's and the gospel points toward basically either the kingdom of God or the resurrection. To Jesus, and then
I do also think that this word culture is helpful when in place of kingdom in this instance again, because it's not some afterlife result of the kingdom that we're focused on here. We're focused on the culture of the time that Jesus is living in, which definitely mirrors our own culture and probably the culture of every human time and place of inequality and cultures that live by their divisions and live by their categories of putting people in their place, so to speak. And the culture of God or the kingdom of God, it never recognizes those divisions. And Jesus is always pressing through those and ignoring them and overcoming them and going against that culture. And I think in this story in particular, he's doing that very deliberately. So, it is about resurrection. It is about Jesus and all his glory. It's so much also about the people living the story and encountering Jesus. And Jesus is really, is one of my friends. Well, Mary Haddad says, going ahead of us, not instead of us. We're supposed to follow behind and do what he did. So it's it's very much about the people and about us. It's about our poor and our privileged and the chasm between us and how to bridge these gaps and bring everybody in. It's not just about beating the rich and, uplifting the poor. It's about reconciling everyone into this culture of love, like you pointed out, kingdom of love. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't want to separate too much that it's not about the girls or it's not about Jairus. It's about Jesus. I think it's about what Jesus demonstrates to bring everybody together into a wholeness.
Yeah. I mean, when you get to the end scene here, back to your question of do you want to come to the end, and Jesus arrives at the house, and the professional mourners are mourning.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how quickly when Jesus says, she's not dead, she's asleep, and they move from mourning to laughing at him. Really a funny guy to laugh at, right? Just like Sarah, in the tent with Abraham, laughing at the so-called manifestation of God there. But and then I love the line where he says he puts everybody out of the house.
Right. Yeah.
He's just okay, get out of here. and one of the things that might be of interest is he takes with him Peter, James, and John and the parents, and Talitha Kum, and raises the little girl, and then because you get into this question in the piece here about people of faith helping to manifest the power of Jesus, and did Jesus bring into the room those who have the faith that'll help lead to this bringing this girl back to life, because there is something happening around all of that stuff too. But Jesus definitely is so centered in himself that he's able to sort out the chaos around him. Yeah.
Right. That's one of the things I find most remarkable about Jesus in this story, is that he is going against people's perceptions and expectations, right? First of all, what you said about the woman with the hemorrhage being at the point of death, according to the Greek, is very interesting, and that was new to me. But either way, he's on the way to heal this daughter of somebody of some standing in the community who is very much in need of it. He's violating any sort of rule of triage, right? The medical professional, which Jesus wasn't exactly, but in a way he was, because he was a healer. He was sought after because he could heal people's ailments like a medical professional. It's not what you're supposed to do. If somebody is dying, you go there, right? But Jesus doesn't do that. He goes against what people perceive he should be doing, what people expect from him. And likewise, when they laugh at him, he is completely undeterred. He is so sure about who he is, and he does not need that mirrored back to him by the people around him, which is very much a theme in John, that I do not seek glory or validation from others because I've already gotten it from my Father, which is just, I think, beautiful and inspiring. And like Elizabeth, you said that we are to go with Jesus, go where he has gone before, because he's our pioneer and perfecter of our faith, as Hebrews says, not just somebody who does it all for us. That's, I think, some good inspiration and encouragement to stand firm in who God says we are, not what the world says. So I like the idea that what Jesus is doing here is something, right? Because he's divine and human. So his humanity is being summoned to a very, to put it as a difficult task would not really begin to touch it. He's bringing somebody back from the dead, which is not really something that we see happening. So this is summoning the fullness of his strength, the fullness of his power. I think it's interesting that who he surrounds himself with might have something to do with it. But I want to talk about the Aramaic phrase that's preserved here, which is unusual in the scriptures to have, unusual in the Gospels, to have the original Aramaic in which Jesus spoke preserved in the text instead of simply translated into Greek. And we have it here as Talitha cum, and it's translated for us, it means little girl, get up. But it doesn't quite get at the fullness of what that means. The Talitha, the little girl, is more than just saying little girl. Like I'm, preschool chaplain here. Like I could say to the girls here, like little girl, whatever. But the way Jesus is talking to this girl is as if she's his daughter. It's really this familial kinship term of endearment, kind of like if you would wake up your daughter, child daughter, when she was sleeping, and it's like, it's time to get up.
Beautiful. Super beautiful.
Again, the tenderness there.
Super beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, that Jesus can be connected to his heart, that his heart can be so wide open, even in the midst of all this noise, all the static, people laughing at him, people not understanding, being tasked with like raising somebody from the dead, that he still has his heart wide open, that he still has total access. Just a beautiful example of full humanity.
Yeah, he lives on that plane.
Yes.
And later in Mark's gospel, we get that great passage where he's like, how much longer do I have to put up with you people? He gets so exasperated at some point of laughing and pushing and pushback and doubt. And, it is static.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. I think we better wrap it up. And there, as you both have said, there's just so much to say, but I hope people will dive into this gospel yourselves and enjoy the study, and we'll see what kind of sermon comes out of it. But there are many sermons that can be preached and many truths to be told out of this. So thanks so much for this great conversation. And please share this podcast with your friends and like and subscribe and all that stuff. And have a blessed week, and we'll see you in church.